and welcome back to Treehouse Garden. I'm really excited today to talk to you about buying seeds. When I first started gardening, I would just purchase all of my plants at the local nursery, and that started to add up and get very expensive. Plus, your choice as far as vegetables and fruits are kind of limited. So I decided that I was going to, 2 years ago, only grow things from seed. And that's turned into a really fun process of learning. I also used to just go buy the seeds at the local Home Depot, Tractor Supply, or my two nurseries up here, Isley's Nursery or Green Acres. And those are all really great places to pick up seeds, especially if you just have a smaller garden. But for me, I started to get really interested, especially in heirloom tomatoes. And the choices at a local stores were a little bit too limited for me. So I started subscribing to all these amazing seed catalogs. A couple years ago, I used only Burpee seeds, and you're probably familiar with that brand as they sell them in your local nursery. And then the last 2 years, I've been using Johnny seeds. And oh my gosh, there's probably 100 plus choices just for tomatoes alone. So it gets a little bit overwhelming, but it's also very exciting to try something new that you wouldn't normally see at a nursery or even a grocery store, and try your hand at something unique. So today I'm going to talk to you about what soil to use, what tools you need, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to start things from seed, especially tomatoes. So let's go. So this year I'm trying out 3 new types of tomato seeds. I have the Martha Washington, the Big Beef, and the Cherry Bomb. So we'll see how they turn out. I'm very excited. But before you start planting your tomatoes, you want to keep in mind that you need the right equipment. So I get at my local store, it's actually a gardening store called Garden Year Round, these awesome trays, and you can see they're not too deep, so they don't take a lot of soil. Because the second important thing that you need when growing tomatoes is the right soil. And they say it should be soilless soil, if that even computes to make sense. But it's created out of materials that are very light and nutritious and fluffy for your tomato seeds. Because if you think about it, tomatoes are really small and very delicate. And if the soil is too dense, the seed will sit, get wet when you water it, and then it will just mildew and disintegrate. Or the seed will struggle to get above the surface if the soil is too heavy and too wet. So this mixture, this seed starter is what it's called. You can find it at your local store, and I'll link it at the bottom. It's the perfect way to start your tomatoes. So let's go ahead and get a tray ready and start these new varieties. I wanted to point out that in addition to the actual tray where I'm going to put the soil, they also sell these little trays that you put them in. The reason you want to do this is because when you water your seeds, you don't want to water them from the top down. You want to water actually in the tray so that the plants absorb the water from the bottom up. That way the seeds don't get displaced and they're not kind of getting beat up by all your water. So that's really important. So when you do purchase this, make sure you purchase some sort of tray that will hold the water so you can water from the bottom up. So this next part requires some patience. They do sell seed dispensing tools where you can pour your seeds in and this little doodad will spit one out at a time. For me, I just like to pour them in my hand. Gives me a chance to kind of look at the seeds, check them out, see if they're good quality. And then I meticulously put 1 seed per cell. I do this because most of my seeds propagate just fine. And I'm able to leave them in this package here until they grow to be about 1 or 2 inches tall. And from them, I'll transplant them into a bigger pot. But if you do more than 1 seed per cell, you're having to rip apart those baby seedlings, and that ruins kind of some of the root system. So although I'm banking on the fact all my seedlings will come up and maybe some won't, if I do 1 at a time, I'm going to have a better successful chance of transplanting them to help them grow larger. Once you've got your trays all full, you're going to want to go out and water your dirt and get it moist, because you don't want to water it after you put the seeds in, because then the seeds are going to move around. Once I have all my seeds in here, then I just take a little carton of soil and I just sprinkle it lightly on the top to just give a very light covering over the seed. Remember, this is really light and fluffy, and we don't want to bog it down with too much, okay? So you're going to go through, sprinkle, even it out, don't push down, because we want the seed to be kind of sitting there relaxed, ready to come up. And from then, we just let nature do its work. So that entire tray is of Martha Washington tomatoes. You're probably wondering, wow, what are you going to do with all those tomatoes? I do like to can a lot, so I try to do 10 to 12 of the same plant in the same row and with different varieties in my garden. I also do like to sell my produce to my neighbors that are around me. And the plants that I don't end up putting in my garden, I do sell them on the local Facebook and gardening pages. So that helps me kind of pay for the cost of my seeds. So this year I have a big garden, keep in mind, but I spent $250 on my summer seeds, and hopefully I'll recoup almost all, if not more, of that by selling plants. So let's get these to the greenhouse and I'll show you some tomatoes that have been planted for 3 weeks now. So we're in my second greenhouse now. It's right behind the first one. This is where I do most of my propagating and growing of my plants because it doesn't get as much direct sun as my first one. My first greenhouse has kind of got my sink and my dirt and my pots. It's more of like a functioning space for me, especially when it's raining. And this greenhouse has an oak tree on the property line, so it does get some shade, but enough sun that the plants can grow quite well. So I did plant some tomatoes about 3 weeks ago, and if you can see them here, they're getting quite big. So you'll know when you're ready to transplant them into a bigger pot when they have at least 3 or 4 leaves. So these have like 4 or 5, so they're definitely ready to go into a bigger pot. So then when I transplant them, I try to put them in pretty good sized pots. You don't have to use the soilless mix now because that's very expensive also. You could just put it in any kind of organic soil you think is best. I like my seedlings to grow pretty tall and chunky and sturdy because I have a lot of insects. If I was to put this little tomato plant in the ground, it would probably be obliterated in a day or two. So I try to get them really strong and healthy to ward off the insects. I want to point out this one is called a Cherokee Purple. And I grew this last summer. It's from Seed Savers. I didn't mention them. And these heirloom tomatoes are like the size of softballs, and they're gorgeous and delicious. And they are red and purple, and they're definitely a seed worth checking out. Well, thanks for joining me today in the Treehouse Garden, and I hope you learned something. And hopefully in the near future, we'll be planting some of these tomatoes on our new vertical trellises. Thanks for joining me, and seed the day.